Have you ever felt that your early art was so much more creative than what you are doing right now? That you used to have limitless ideas and then it all disappeared somewhere? Because I did. I haven't really been drawing since childhood, but rather since I was about 12, and my first drawings were created to illustrate my first book ideas. More specifically, I drew my characters, and the characters of the stories my friends and I were coming up with. I wasn't driven by a desire to draw, much less to draw beautifully, but rather to just realize an endless stream of story ideas. My first book idea, then my second, then a comic book idea that we wanted to draw with friends, then the fourth book idea that was born out of fanfic idea. It seemed like every month I had a new story in my brain, and each and every one of them had at least a dozen of characters that were just fun to come up with and draw. Even if it was just simple character designs in static poses. And then I started drawing little scenes. I drew characters that seemed interesting to me, with interesting clothes and in interesting and strange poses. They were simple pencil drawings and I could easily do a drawing a day. And I liked them. I was proud of them. And sometimes I just made things because I thought they were cute or interesting. Like this one time when I made 9 origami cranes for my room out of colored paper and I had 9 strips of different colors left over, I drew characters on them. Each one had a different theme and each one was framed in this stretched out colored rectangle. It was the best creative time of my life. And then it all came to an end. Partially because I started running my first social media page and drawing requests because I thought that this was what I needed to do. Partially because of school. Partially because of personal problems and because of bad mental state. Partially because I didn't have any more ideas. It was a year of my life where I felt terrible and honestly drawing was no longer my priority. The only thing that I at least somehow kept working on during this time was my main book. Just this single project. I set it in my head to work at least on it, and everywhere I heard, you need to focus on your main project if you want to finish it. You'll never finish anything if you keep switching from one idea to another. So there was no longer switching. I felt lost and bad, and all I had left was this single book I was working on, almost no drawings, and at one point I just got scared. At what point the thought came to me, I've been writing this book for a couple of years now, and I will be writing it for a long time, but I came up with the idea then, earlier, in that creative time, when I was a kid. And there's been nothing else since. I thought, what if these are the last ideas I have? What if my peak creativity and peak creative productivity have passed? And now all I am left with is milking ideas from the past, writing book ideas I come up with as a kid, and redrawing all characters. What if I will not be able anymore to come up with the idea that I love? Isn't that a scary thought? I had no ideas. Even when I was writing productively and trying to draw again, all of my ideas were secondary. Nothing new, nothing fresh. The fact is, on top of everything that happened between that phase of exploding creativity and the new phase of inner emptiness, time had passed. A couple of years. Enough time for me to have a feeling that I was a different person. Enough time for me to start feeling like I'd grown out of my creativity. I tried to draw from my head like I used to, like I always did before. But now the only thing I had left to do was reference studies. And I know there's nothing wrong with artists using references. I think that references are a great tool for any artist. But for me, at the time, this whole situation was literally paralyzing. I wanted to draw something, and since drawing from my head didn't work anymore, I copied references. I liked my results. It seemed to me that technically my skill was growing, but was it freedom if I literally couldn't take a single step away from the reference? It was as if I wasn't an artist, just a copy machine, as if I couldn't come up with anything out of my head. It was scary to draw and to feel absolute emptiness. Writing books with the feeling that this is all I'll ever be capable of. The truth is, people do change as they get older, both because many processes in the brain function differently and because we just change. Creativity is such a complex process that, in addition to our brain abilities, it is influenced by our environment, physical abilities, and even random things. And the way that for me imagination doesn't work the way it used to is just a fact. But you know what? Maybe that's a bold statement given that I rarely properly define what's going on in my life, but I am having more fun with creativity now than I ever had before. Now, after a couple of years of all of that art block, I feel like I'm finally creating again. I am actually still afraid to even talk about it, because I feel like once I get too sure of the thought and voice it out loud, it's all going to end. I've been nurturing this feeling in my head, grown this little piece of light in me, afraid that the darkness of the world around me would extinguish it if it came out, and I would be left in the dark again. Maybe it will still happen. Maybe the solution I've found for myself isn't permanent, but it's working now, and for the last year and a half, I feel like I've been creating something again. And you know what conclusion I've came to? In order for my ideas to emerge, I need to nurture them. Whereas I used to be a gatherer who just wandered in the woods looking for ideas, now that that's not working, I need to become a farmer. I need to nurture them from scratch. Going back to my old sketchbooks, I see that I drew a lot, but really just as they were good and memorable drawings, there were a lot of disposable ideas, many of which didn't lead to anything. Especially because I hardly even drew backgrounds back then, and a lot of the ideas would have benefited from that greatly. But now I just act differently, slower, calmer. It's not to say that creativity will never happen again. In my case, it's just different now. My approach? I've started writing down my ideas and identifying projects from them. Now I'll try to explain what I mean by that, and I'll probably start with books. Little Fairies is my main story right now, the one that I've been working all this time, and given that I really want to finish it, I've started trying to not get distracted by other books, which is almost impossible in of itself, but I thought that I need at least to try. My other, at that point, leftover ideas from my childhood, I just wrote down in a list in a notebook. I didn't think about them very much, but I didn't quite let them go. But I kinda moved on, living experiences, reading and watching something new, getting inspired by something little by little. And it turned out that little by little, these ideas also develop further. It's not always a linear process. Sometimes I just ask myself what exactly in this book I wanted to write. And it turns out that this dynamic between characters or this part of the plot would work well with another idea that I had, and I can combine them together. And sometimes I realize that I've outgrown this idea. I don't want to write this book anymore, and I let it go. And then again, I'll be inspired by something, and something new will come to this spot. Raw, totally not ready to be written down yet. It may not even sound like an idea, just a feeling or a single detail, but it can grow from there. Connect with something separate or just grow slowly with new little fragments that I catch from my life and everything that surrounds me. I think that developing ideas, getting them off the ground is actually a skill too, and a skill that can only be learned from practice. Because for me, developing ideas can now take weeks, months, and even years. But is this such a bad thing? Because if my creativity and my art works this way, Maybe that's exactly what I've always lacked. Thinking and planning. I want to point out that I know that planning is not the way for everyone. It's not an advice video, but I really want to share my perspective on things, and maybe it will also help somebody. Because for me, planning became such an easy solution to all of my problems that I even felt silly. The solution was right under my nose, and for some reason I couldn't get to it in a couple of years. I thought, what if I just planned an art project? Would I work on this the same way I work on my book projects? My answer is yes, I will. And an art project can be anything. For example, what if I want to draw an art for each of my main characters in the book? Pretty simple and abstract idea. Or what if I did redesigns for some of my childhood drawings? Not forced because I don't have any ideas, but as a fun challenge or thought experiment. What if I want to try drawing landscapes in inks? And what's next? Now that I've written it all down, I can think, develop these projects little by little. I can spend a couple of weeks or even months thinking about how I would like to draw my main characters. I can sketch and look for poses and references without rushing and without stress. I can choose those childhood drawings I would like to draw and sketch what I would like to change about them. I can decide to combine drawing landscapes with trying to find locations for my book without the responsibility of having them as official and canonical book art, and think it through in my sketchbook. And then I'll draw it all. And it's not about overthinking and perfectionism, though those two are my enemies number one, I can admit it. But it is about not rushing myself to come up with ideas quickly in conditions where I already have a lot of other things to stress about in my life. How obvious it is that I don't have to sit down every day at my desk thinking, oh my gosh, what should I draw today? I don't have to come up with ideas in a rush every single time, and then feel terrible when nothing comes to my mind. It's just not necessary. I can still draw spontaneously when I want to, but the rest of the time I can sit down to drawings that I planned out before. My drawings need time. My creativity needs time. I now rarely come up with plots that mesmerize me in an hour, but in a couple of hours, a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, totally possible. I almost never came up with drawing ideas on the fly now, and it's even rarer for me to draw in one sitting. But in a couple of days or weeks, absolutely. Creativity now is about building persistently and carefully. It's about trying things out and seeing which ideas took root and which don't. It's about paying attention to a lot of interesting little things in any aspects of my life, and adding, layering it all into a complex reflection of my creation. Also, creativity is no longer just an idea. After all, an idea is only a small part of piece of creation. Creativity is now about the realization of this idea. It's a long-term journey and long-term plan with nowhere to rush. Creativity is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So, if ideas will never come to me like they did when I was a kid, then I'm just going to build them on my own. And this little drawing that I've been doing all this time, it's actually a redraw of my childhood art. Look how cute it is! And continuing my theme, it was drawn for my mini project of redrawing some of my old art, a tribute to those very old ideas of mine. Here, for example, is an art that I posted on social media not so long ago. I wanted to film it too, but I forgot to turn on the camera. And in general, this project included 4 drawings of this kind, so if you are interested in seeing the remaining 2, they will be in the next videos. Thank you all for watching all the way through the end. If you want to see more of my art and hear more of my stories, you can subscribe to my channel. That was Iri Mirav, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!